Great. So, Doug and I are getting ready to present at the next cafe a chapter from Facing the Planetary by William Connolly. And we're also studying this book by Gregory Bateson. This is another group, Bateson study. Gregory Bateson's Steps to an Ecology of Mind, and Nora Bateson's book, Smaller Arcs of Larger Circles. So in this conversation, I would like to figure out what it is that we are creating together. And so I would just like to have a clean start. And so Doug, for this session right now, this meeting, to be really useful for you, it will be like what?
For a little context, we didn't get a chance to check in with each other before we pressed record, but I'm sitting in the library right now, and outdoors it's heated up to about 50-something degrees. And I think indoors, the heating unit still is set to as if it's in the teens as it was the day before. So I'm sitting here thinking I'm within the Anthropocene of some sort. It's that's one of my biggest pet peeves is artificial heat blowing directly on me. If you want to torture me, then you can pick at me and do all that type of stuff. But if I have artificial heat blowing on me, such as in a car or elsewhere, it affects me. But so I want to get past these bodily sensations. I noted that I picked up a copy at the library of Facing the Planetary, Connolly's book, and I'm on chapter 3. But it's very interesting that I could speed through it, but I want to savor it. He's a great writer. I personally don't need to go anywhere. I'm right here where I am, having this conversation with you. And another book that I'm reading, which is something we've discussed a little bit, and I've briefly discussed on the side, is managing skills. That's something I'm relatively new to. It's management. But there's a book that Caroline suggested, or an author, Samantha Slade. So I checked out a book called Going Horizontal. And that theme ties in with the patriarchy, the vertical, hierarchical type of thinking. And so even though this is the business thinking that Samantha Slade is doing, it's like Bateson's writing, it's relevant to, well, you don't necessarily have to create a business. This can be applied to my daily life, thinking on horizontal playing ground, I suppose. We're all equal. We all have the chance to participate, be engaged, and non-hierarchical thinking. She briefly mentions that it's more natural. It's a reflection of nature or our natural drives. So that, along with the Bateson reading, along with the Planetary, Facing the Anthropocene, that's where I'm at right now.
And you are within the Anthropocene, and you want to get past this artificial setting. You mentioned the vertical and the horizontal. And reflections of nature. And for this session to be like that, you will be like what?
I'm thinking of nesting, nests, and the layers there. So I'm sitting in the nest, and I don't know if I'm a baby bird being fed by the mother or what I am in that, but I'm in the nest with the rest.
You're in the nest. Thank you. And what support do you need from me or from the larger system, the larger group, which we are members of? Or what resources do you have that you'd like to develop so this can happen?
You did mention the Bateson Group and the cafe session on Connolly's preface or prelude, and so this can be a lead-in to how that these discussions, the sort of mind nature as you framed it, how that will form naturally. I don't want to force anything upon our thinking here.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to ask myself the same question, and what comes to me now, having listened to you and opening up my senses, for this meeting to be really useful for me, it will be like a liminal zone. And for this to be like a liminal zone, I will be like a lone wolf, howling in ecstasy under the Texas moon. And like this. Oh! Thank you. And support. I do need support for accepting the different kinds of touch that I can give and receive, and to explore together a we space that is coherent enough so that our species can survive within an environment. And this, I believe, is front and center in our attention right now. As I mentioned in the last call that we did in the Bateson Group, the New York Times reporting that 1/5 of the coral reef has died in the last 3 years. I think that is a very significant fact. And I believe this is something that when we pay attention to this, becoming sensitive to um, becoming sensitive, as Nora Bateson says, is not necessarily pleasant. And you may not make a big profit by becoming sensitive to these liminal zones where we are in the in-between. So I believe that it's interesting to read Nora and Gregory with our friend, Mr. Connolly, because I believe there are tremendous overlaps. I just want to read briefly a paragraph and take it from there, because we're basically just setting up a kind of conversation so that we can pursue this in more depth with our colleagues at the cafe and our colleagues at the Bateson Group. So I'm just wanting to quote Mr. Connolly. At various points in this study, I adopt a we voice. As will become clear, that voice seeks to hook into a pluralized and invitational us. The idea is to become part of an active cross-regional pluralist assemblage composed of multiple minorities in different parts of the world, rather than to place any constituency at the center or top of a singular unity. No single class, nation, faith, gender, state, order, region, party, racialized constituency, or age group can form the authoritative center of the militant we needed today. So he goes on to say about this pluralized we may fail to generate the energy and momentum needed in time. But still, he talks about the potential pluralized we resides in a world and time of tragic possibility. So I think that tragic possibility is really fascinating. And can we be curious about those possibilities rather than to react habitually to our fears and our defense mechanisms, and go shopping, have another martini, watch more TV. These are the kind of practices that Nora is bringing our attention to as the ways we numb ourselves. And I think her plea in that article you shared with me, and she also was in a recent interview. I saw it on YouTube and I posted it, but unfortunately it's been removed. But she really was very articulate in exploring how we numb ourselves so that we don't have to be sensitive to the the injustices, the liminal zones, which can scare the hell out of us, So I think that's the challenge, because there have to be enough people who are sensitive enough to these shifts that are occurring, who don't retreat into the narcotic effects of our culture. And so that's my challenge, personal challenge. And I'm really open to how others are responding to the multiple messages that we're all receiving through this, through this technology right now. So thank you for giving me this opportunity to open up to the possibilities.
So your howl in ecstasy transported me into, I heard shamanic drumming going on in the background, and I'm sitting up there in my nest. I thought I was a crow at one point, but that seems too wise to me at this point. That seems like a bird or a spirit that knows more than me as a human or as a baby bird learning to fly within this world. I am not the crow that knows at this point. So I leapt from my nest onto your shoulder as you were howling, and was taken for a ride. I wanted to go into the ocean, but birds can't do that. Wolves can only swim. They cannot see much of the reef structure that's being lost. And a question that doesn't need to be answered right now, and it's not directed towards you, but a reflection on maybe my personal views on perhaps the negative, what Connolly calls it, the nihilism. What is the term? Negative nihilism, perhaps, or passive?
Yeah, passive, yeah.
And so the question was, if 1/5 of the human population disappeared, would we be mourning as we do with the reef? That ties in with the Anthropocene or Cthulhucene. Marco mentioned the Haraway's piece briefly. So, but we're still trying to define this era, this age that we're living in, and how do we respond? That we are noticing more and more. Even the billionaires, I've noticed. There's an article in Bloomsburg Business Week, which I forget the billionaire's name, but he's devoting his entire fortune to the issue of overpopulation. Not to wipe out anybody, but to donating to charities and organizations attempting to figure out what might work. That's a good sign there. There's talks being done by many, many different people. These have been occurring off and on since the 40s, 50s, 60s. But we're realizing more and more of the interdependency upon our strategic thinking or creativity to make that leap into deeper thought or more reflective thought, shamanic thinking, perhaps.
And make that leap into deeper thought and maybe shamanic thought. Wow, that's great. I'm just wanting to, we've talked a lot about paying attention and paying attention to how we're paying attention. And recognizing that we are a part of and apart from one another. And how do we make sense of that? That boundary. And I'm thinking of Nora Bateson, because she discusses this a lot with in that interview. And I think in that paper on liminal leadership. And her big questions about what leadership could mean in the Anthropocene cannot mean what it meant, what it means now. So we are transitional beings, and it is, I think, her father uses this wonderful expression of perceptually scanning the interface, and he calls this a double vision. How we can momentarily sense a clear felt boundary between the self and world, and that the boundary is good. The momentary experience of acting or reacting upon the boundary is vital to our survival. So I think the daughter and the father are speaking, from their own experiences, but also they share something that I think is very vital for all of us to pay exquisite attention to, this felt boundary. And, this is a very big challenge. And I think I mentioned this in the last Bateson call, because, in the old world, where before computers, before we had this marvelous technology, face-to-face communiques were extremely common. And actually, that was the only way I thought anything ever got done, was if you meet up with someone face-to-face. Now we're doing these Zoom calls, these Zoom conference calls, and we're scattered all over many locations around the planet. And we're not sharing the environment in ways that we were before. And this can, I think, create havoc on the nervous system of persons who are extremely sensitive and who have a natural tendency towards the empathic. I speak from personal experience. It can be a devastating experience, actually, very disorienting. So I believe this could be a terrible curse, or it can be an enormous blessing. If we do find the capacity to contact our center and to invite and open ourselves up to the field. And this is where Nora's, I think, is very, very articulate. She's talking about the field of fields. What could that possibly mean? I think this is the challenge. And I would like to do a few centering exercises. I don't know if we need to do it in this call, but perhaps future calls, maybe we can do a series of Zoom conversations where we do like a half an hour, where we do some, where we practice tender sobriety. You know, we can tune in to these fields and get lost really fast if we don't have contact with our center. So it's, how do we contact our center, that open channel, which is often spoken of in yoga and various, and the martial arts. And then how can we open to the field of all possibility? This, I think, is a very big challenge for me personally, and I'm really wanting to invite others to participate and to create together something that may not be obvious to any of us right now, but I believe does have survival value. So that's my 2 cents. And I consider you an ally here, a friend and an ally. I mentioned that I am in search of allies, because whatever breakthroughs we have individually won't mean very much unless we're in a community of competent persons who can recognize and acknowledge and remain open to those possibilities. Because, you know, on our own, we may have brilliant insights, but they vanish very fast unless you have someone that you can share them with. And they can share their insights and breakthroughs and breakdowns with you. Because sometimes those breakdowns can be extremely meaningful if we have the support that we need. Because I think it's sometimes hard to tell the difference between a breakdown and a breakthrough. If you're sane in an insane system, as I believe we are, sometimes we're going to appear really weird to other people who are very much into the narcotics of the culture and who are very adept at numbing themselves from feeling perhaps the paradoxes and the impasses that you may feel as a heightened sensitivity that comes with, I think, some of the explorations that we've already been doing together, and through the reading. As you mentioned, reading, coming together and reading together, these close readings, I believe, is a real catalyst for opening up all of these to the field. A good book, I open up to the field. And a good book is a member of a community of good books. So I think this is part of our mission here. Maybe unexpressed and unarticulated, but I think it's something that is the glue that holds our cosmos community, our fledgling community together.
I will be reflecting on the field of fields, the term you use, which I wrote down, tender sobriety. That's something I'm exploring. The face-to-face we're doing right now, I've forgotten there's a screen here. It's that easy. It's that easy to occur. And we've discussed all sorts of technology, this and that before, but there is a connection here that cannot be fully felt in our daily life, even face to face without the screen. So that is something we'll continue to explore, and we're learning this kindness, this tender sobriety, and so I look forward to where this is going, with the site in mind, with the co-op, I guess, and the Cosmos Cafe and our reading groups. These are nested fields that we're examining and exploring. Some participate in spots or find their one nest, or travel like a lone bird to various nests. And I sense many different flows, as you stated. There is a certain wavelength with it in the Cosmos Cafe. And the Bateson Reading, I'm really enjoying the pace that Jeffrey so graciously, kindly placed upon us. This is not a fast reading. It's an essay or a chapter per week. That gives us time to read in between the lines, to sense the in-between. This next cafe is an in-between exploration, which also ties in with the wavelength of the cafe, which has gone from the human communication, the human grounding, into the human malaise, the problem we see in front of us, with complexity and the chaos. And now we'll be going into facing this planetary behemoth, that this conundrum, and where we go from there. There's only plenty of space around us. So thank you, Johnny, for setting this up. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And I feel like we should maybe come to a close pretty soon, because I feel like this is the what do you call it before the main dish comes? The appetizer. So this is to throw out another metaphor. This is kind of the appetizer for a larger conversation with more participants. But I think it's great that you've initiated these one-on-one conversations prior to those larger conversations, because I think it sort of sets the tone, and maybe begins the beginning of a group intention that could start to form. So if anyone sees this before the Bateson group, which is tomorrow, or before next week's Tuesday Cafe, that would be great. It would just supplement, I believe, and maybe be an overture before the big opera happens. Okay, so that's my metaphor. Is there any, but because I feel very satisfied by our conversation, and I feel like I've gotten my intention, that what I wanted to have happen in this experience today with you, this meeting with you, has happened. And I'm wondering about yourself. You mentioned you came up with that lovely metaphor of the nest and the bird on the wolf's shoulder. Is there anything else about that?
I mentioned the brief journey that I took, but the reading that I've been doing has been words upon the page and inserted into my word bank here. And to make that come to life, you, along with this short session, have expanded that vision, the visionary aspect of it. So I'll be exploring. I don't have a specific statement right now, so I'll come back to it tomorrow.
Yeah, and that visionary that you mentioned, may we take that out into the events that happen today. Take that out into the world. I think it's the interfaces, the perceptual scanning that Bateson asks us to do of those interfaces. We've been doing this together, and we can continue that as we go out and do our business today. And look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
Yes. Thank you, Johnny.
Thank you. Next time.